lean in. Just give them another one. Lean in. Like, just lean into this. Whatever it is, if it's your problem, these problems that you think you have, lean into them. The program's there for you. There are people that are amazing in this program, like you. Like, there's rooms full of them, and they're just amazing. And if you ask for help, they will help you. And if they don't, they'll send you to someone who can. And if you just put the effort in and lean into it, whatever it is, you'll get the solution in the rooms. So I just say, lean into it.
It's time for the Share Recovery Podcast, where we bring you amazing life-changing success stories from addicts and alcoholics all over the world who share their inspiring journey in recovery. And now, here's your host, O.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of TSP, the Share Podcast. And today, I have a very special guest. Joseph W. Naus is joining us on the Share Podcast, Straight Pepper Diet. This is a book of sex addiction, alcohol abuse, absolute drunken debauchery at its absolute worst. What a privilege it was for me to do this interview. Just to give you a quick preview of upcoming attractions, Joseph was born in 1971. He graduated from Pepperdine Law, passed the bar in 1997. And he survived a hard-scrambled, impoverished childhood, raised by his young mother, a heroin addict, turned shut-in depressive, to become a respected lawyer. However, at age 32, his American dream became a nightmare when his own sex and alcohol addictions collided and exploded. Joseph's harrowing yet hope-filled memoir, Straight Pepper Diet, begins on the last day of his former life. Here is one of the famous opening lines of the book. On Tuesday, I was a respected civil trial lawyer making six figures. On Wednesday, I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed, and then it got worse. Joseph has spent the last 12 years reinventing himself, and due to a series of events that we will discuss in the interview, Joseph was disbarred and had to start all over again. This is an interview I've been dying to release. And for those of you who have not read Straight Pepper Diet, do yourself a favor, pick this one up. It is absolutely a page turner. I personally downloaded on Audible and listen to it every day on the way to work, like a mini series. So it's time to dive into Joseph's story, but first, a little Share Podcast news. Okay, guys, another quick reminder that I will be at the Seattle International Narcotics Anonymous Convention this year, July 29th, 30th, and 31st. 2016. It will be held at the Seattle Airport Marriott, and I will be the main speaker on Friday night opening up the convention. If you go to the Share Podcast website, on the right-hand side of the website, you'll see a banner. It's a blue banner that says SINAC 2016. Click on that banner. It'll send you to the page where you have information about room rates, about registering for the convention. Everything you need to know about attending the convention is right on that website. So again, I would love to meet you guys in person. If you can make it out there, would love to see you. Okay, guys, first of all, thanks so much for everyone who has helped support the Share Podcast. And for those of you listening who would like to know how you can help support the Share Podcast, let me give you a couple of ideas. First of all, the most important one, which is absolutely free, is to leave a rating and review on iTunes. iTunes single-handedly is one of the most powerful ways for people to find the Share Podcast. So to make it easy for you guys, what I've done is I've put buttons on the website, www.thesharepodcast.com. Go there on the right-hand side. The very first button reads, subscribe on iTunes. Click on that button. It's going to send you directly to the iTunes podcast app. And from there, you'll click subscribe and then go to the section that says rate and review. And please leave us a 5-star rating. There's no question about it. iTunes is one of the best ways for our listeners to find the Share Podcast, especially when they're searching for it on Google. If you don't have an iPhone, then go to Stitcher Radio. It's the banner right underneath the subscribe on iTunes. Click on that and do the exact same thing. Subscribe and then leave a 5-star rating and review. there's no question about it. This is the best way for you to show your support. I also want to thank all the listeners who have been clicking on the Amazon banner ad. Folks, for those of you wondering what's another fantastic way to support the show is by clicking on that banner before you shop on Amazon. You're going to shop on Amazon anyway. It's not going to cost you 1 penny more, and it kicks back some commission to the Share Podcast. We've already seen a dramatic increase in commission since we added the banner ad. So thanks again, guys. It's helping so much. And as far as being of service, you can also go to the website and click on the Join the Facebook Private Group banner. It'll take you right to the Facebook private group where you can request to be added and do some service. There's newcomers in there that are posting daily, old-timers sharing experience, strength, and hope. It's an absolutely beautiful way to contribute to your own recovery as well as to those in the community. So plug yourself in, get into that private Facebook group. It's absolutely thriving. And again, it's a wonderful way for everyone to be of service. And of course, I want to give a big thank you to all of the listeners who have continued to give donations every month. Thank you guys so much for your generous donations. And for those of you that would like to contribute and help grow and support the Share Podcast financially, you can go to the website, click on the Donate with PayPal button, and it'll take you to the page where you can make your donation. And for those of you that use Sober Grid or are looking for an app on their phone where you can find meetings, have a sobriety calculator, connect privately with members of your local recovery community, or when you travel, connect with members in recovery in order to find a meeting, then you might as well join the private alumni group for Share Podcast listeners. So go into the Sober Grid menu once you've registered. Scroll down to where it says Alumni Group, click on Add Group, and type in SHAIR, and the Share Podcast Alumni Group will pop right up. And for those of you who would like to know which are the most popular podcast episodes, there is a banner on the right-hand side of the page as you scroll down that says Most Popular Podcast Episodes. Click on that banner, and it will take you to the page that features the most popular podcast episodes based on listener feedback and number of downloads. And for those of you who would like a list of all the books that have been recommended by our guests, go to the right-hand side of the website and click on the banner that says Recommended Books. It'll take you right to the page where we have a list of all the recommended books. And finally, I want to give credit to the Share Podcast team that is instrumental in producing the Share Podcast, Zinzi Gugu and Evelyn E., who handle the audio editing for each podcast episode, Omar Hernandez, that does all the social media cover art, and Krista Wojo, who handles all of our social media marketing. Without this amazing team, there's no way I could have continued to produce the podcast every week. Thank you, guys. I couldn't do this without you. So let's dive into this week's episode, but first, a quick message from our sponsors. Sober Nation is the largest online recovery community and treatment resource center. They provide treatment resources to those struggling with addiction, as well as to the family members who are caught in the crossfire. On top of that, Sober Nation is a huge community of good people who share their experience with each other. They have informative content, recovery and addiction news, as well as an entire clothing line which helps expand the culture of recovery. They can easily be found at www.sobernation.com. Sober Nation is putting recovery on the map. And finally, would you like to receive the most popular AA daily devotions free in one distribution? Transitions Daily delivers daily devotions from the 24 hours a day, AA Thought for the Day, Daily Reflections, Big Book Quote, Just for Today, As Bill Sees It, plus more. You can get our distribution daily via email, private Facebook group, or Twitter. Go to dailyaaemails.com for more information. And don't forget to share dailyaaemails.com with friends in meetings and with sponsees in recovery. Now back to the show. Hey, Joseph, thanks for joining us.
Howdy, glad to be here.
I'm excited to have you on the show, buddy. How you feeling today?
I'm feeling great.
Excellent, excellent. Me too. Folks, today we have a special treat. We have Joseph W. Naus joining us on the Share Podcast, the author of Straight Pepper Diet. Now, Joseph was recently featured as a guest on the Rich Roll Podcast. That's where I first heard him, and it was an amazing, mind-blowing story. And in the first chapter, this is one of the verses you'll read where it says, "On Tuesday, I was a respected civil trial lawyer making six figures. On Wednesday, I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed, charged with attempted murder, and then it got worse." So we're definitely in for a treat, folks. But first, I want to dive into Joseph's. Before we dive into Joseph's story, I just want to get to know, or our listeners to know, a little bit more about how things are today. You know, your daily routine, including recovery and book tours, whatever you've got going on right now.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm stoked to be here. You know, right now it's interesting because I'm 13 years off alcohol, 13 years sober. And when I first got sober and even recently, I just really do well when I have structure. I'm a list guy,
Nice.
I will literally, the night before, I'll write down a list, like wake up at 8:30 breakfast. Like I get real specific. But I've tried to let that go a little bit because right now my life is goes in so many different directions. I got a couple different businesses. I got the book. My mom right now has cancer, and so I've been driving out to see her a lot and dealing with that. And I'm a golf fanatic, and that's part of my daily thing. And I got different meetings I go to, and sponsees that are doing different things. And so I'm really, like, today is just a good example. I got up at 8 o'clock. I didn't get a lot of sleep, so I didn't do much. I just got up at 8 o'clock. I went over to Golf Tech, which is this technical golf instruction school where they use video and stuff, and I worked out there for an hour and a half, and then I drove about 100 miles to go visit my mom, who is in a hospice, and I was there with her, and on the way out there I listened to The Power of Now, to kind of ground myself before I got out there, and I hung out with my mom, which is rather difficult. Drove back here for 100 miles and was exhausted, took a little nap, and hung out with my fiance for a little bit, and then here I am with you.
That's full day.
Yeah.
Gosh, with your mother, how long? When did she get diagnosed? How long?
It's been about a year. She was diagnosed with stage 4 small cell with metastasized to the brain. So it's a kind of a miracle she's been around this long, because usually it's a couple months with that.
Man, that is tough. My father passed away at 67 with cirrhosis of the liver, and that was just a really, really, really tough year. I, like you, spent a lot of time taking care of him and visiting him and seeing him and taking care of him in the hospital. I hit a ton of meetings in that time because it was really, really rough. How are you maintaining your spiritual condition these days? Are you hitting lots of meetings? Do you have a spiritual ritual that you have on a regular basis?
I try to meditate 10 to 20 minutes every day. I like to do it in the morning, but quite frankly, it varies on when I do it. So that's part of it. I have a couple sponsees, and it's kind of nice because they're both in real different places in their sobriety. And I have a sponsor that I talk to, and in fact, I just talked to him the other night, and he was like, you need to be calling your sponsees and talk to them. So that's how I do it. And, it's really interesting. If you've been in the rooms a lot like you have, that's one of those things you hear over and over is people's stories of their parents passing.
Yes.
And how they were there and how they went through it and how hard it was and how they relied on the program. So I feel like I've got this primer, I've heard it so many times. And some of the stories are different. Some, it's sudden. Some of them, they go and live with their parents and take care of them for a year, or, but it's because I'm in the program, it's not something new, or it's not, it's new to me, but it's not an experience that I haven't heard a lot about.
Well, the good news is that because of the rooms, it's second nature. I know exactly what to do. And I did. I lived with my dad for his last 6 months. So that was, wow. It was, man, the most difficult time in my life. And it was, as a matter of fact, for a lot of it, he was at the UCLA Medical Center. So I was in LA at the time. God, there's a meeting in Santa Monica that I was doing, it's a very famous one. I forget the name of the place. But, I was hitting that one every day because it was by the hospital. So I'd have this routine where I would, leave my sister's house, go hit the meeting, spend the day with my dad, go home, try and decompress, get up the next day and do the same thing. I had to have that recovery connection, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, man, it's all the same. We all get through it. It's tough, but I mean, we're Vikings. When you get past this, man, you're just a Viking. All right, there's absolutely nothing that I can't go through and stay sober. I learned that during that period. So, man, I will pray for you and your mom, brother.
Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
So, man, you said so. You got 13 years, right? When's your anniversary date?
It'll be 13 on July 26th.
Nice. Oh, 26, huh?
Yeah.
July 26th. I'm celebrating 13 years, May 26th.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so like in a couple of weeks.
Wow, congrats.
Yeah, I'm pumped, man. I'm pumped. I'm very excited. So let's talk a little bit, your story, there's a lot of addiction and different forms of addiction. I always open up with how old you were the first time you drank or used drugs and how it made you feel.
Okay, I was a very late bloomer. My mom was a heroin addict and my dad was out of the picture, but also had addiction issues. And so I had a really healthy fear of drugs. I was straight edge in high school, like I used to,
man.
I used to wear the black X's on my hand,
Yep.
And I was very, I remember listening to Minor Threat and being like, anti-drugs, anti-alcohol, anti-everything. And, then I was in high school and early college, I was a kickboxer, so I was really into health. And I was a vegetarian. I'd read A Diet for a New America, and that's when I first went vegetarian way back in like 1987. And I stopped kickboxing because I was in college and was tired of getting kicked in the head. And, I'm like, I'm thinking, I'm trying to become a lawyer or go to college. Being kicked in the head over and over probably isn't a good thing. So I stopped that and I had a few drinks here and there with a lawyer mentor, just kind of like after work having a beer or something. But the first time I got wasted was when I was in New York for the first time. And it was like this just unbelievable experience. I drank for the first time, smoked cigarettes for the first time, and cheated on my girlfriend for the first time. And my fiance at the time, different fiance, obviously. And I was in New York. It was cold, the high rises, it was like magical. And at that moment, I said to myself, like, this is the new best thing I've ever experienced. All that hard work, kickboxing and straight edge and vegetarianism and all that stuff. This is the new thing. It wasn't like I just immediately became an alcoholic, but in my head, I knew like, this is the new best thing there is, And it was magical. It was absolutely friggin' magical.
How old were you?
I was 21.
Oh, okay.
No, was it 21 or 22? Yeah, I think it was my sophomore year of college.
All right. So the straight edge kept you on the straight and narrow for a while.
Yeah.
Okay.
The fear and the straight edge, yeah.
Now, so would you say that, because I know you're in 12-step, but would you say that sex addiction is your primary addiction? Or, which one of those would you say is your primary addiction?
Well, it's weird. It's like I actually listened to one of your earlier podcasts, and I thought you summed it up really brilliantly in that saying that, addiction is addiction. We relate in different programs, but addiction is addiction. And so I kind of think of it as like if you were in a food program because you overate, you wouldn't have a chocolate program, a pizza program, and a cola program. So I kind of think of it that way. Now, with saying that, it's really helpful to be able to relate to different things. So to answer your question, ironically, I kind of consider nicotine to be my most hardcore addiction. It was the very last one that I was able to kick. Sex was kind of the most powerful one, but also the most risky. So alcohol was kind of my fallback. But as you know from my story, alcohol is what really did me in the end.
Yeah.
It was kind of a try. But man, powerlessness, nicotine taught me powerlessness, because when I quit the sex and the alcohol, I had the judge, the state bar, the LAPD, the probation department, rehab, the bail bondsman, my law partner. I had everybody. There was no chance I was going to relapse. It would have been like putting a bullet to my head. But with the nicotine, I'm just like, Like, this is all I have. This is all I have. And, so, ironically, that is kind of the last thing I gave up. But I kind of go to the mothership program as my main program now. That answers the question.
It does, and I love hearing that because, again, we were just talking about how we don't promote or endorse any 12-step anonymous program, and I even say that at the end of the podcast episode. That's the disclosure. But I initially got sober in NA, and I remember my sponsor. He was like, "You'll notice something in the literature. All right, it addresses addiction. It doesn't address cocaine. It doesn't address sex. It doesn't address food. It addresses addiction." And I'm addicted to everything, to more. If it feels good, I want it, and I want it in, massive quantities, whatever that may be. And that's where I learned to understand where all that manifestation came from. Understanding that I am an addict, and I'm trying to fill this void. And if I stop using one thing, then I'm just going to gravitate to the next thing that makes me feel better, all right? And then once I get rid of that, I'm just going to gravitate to the next. So it's almost like I got to take this, 12-headed monster and chop all of its heads off, right? Get to the base of it all as we peel it all back. So yes, I agree 100%. At some point or another, if we don't address the fact, if we don't address the actual addiction, we are doomed to repeat our history.
Yeah. Just to say something about Narcotics Anonymous that I always loved was that I remember this from being in rehab, and I have friends who are in that program now, and I really love that they say, in their preamble, or I don't know, maybe it's the preamble that I hear, I don't know where it comes from, but it says, alcohol is a drug, period.
Yeah.
And, that's the truth. Alcohol is a drug, period. Just because it's liquid and it happens to be a little older than some of the other drugs, it's a drug, period. And it's as simple as that. And I totally agree with the way that they structure their program. Even their book is sometimes a little more readable sometimes, So yeah, I'm a big fan of that.
I am too. I am too. But folks, again, I was very excited when I found out that Joseph was going to be on the show. Because his story is riddled with the sex addiction. The thing is that as I was listening to Joseph share a story on the other podcast on Rich Rolls, I just remember driving and listening to it and thinking, it's terrifying how much I can relate to this story. Like, we'd get to certain parts and I go, yep, I can relate. The mindset is just uncanny. It's the same thing, man. This obsession that drives you. So I definitely want to get into that. So I think it's time for me to turn this show over to you, Joseph. I want you to share your story with us, the battle with drugs, alcohol, and sex, the wreckage it caused in your life, when you hit rock bottom, and finally your journey into recovery up until today. Don't worry, Joseph, I'm right there with you, buddy. So take it away.
That's a lot to cover. But I'll do it. So, like I said, my mom was a heroin addict. I grew up really, really poor. We grew up on welfare in rough neighborhoods. I was usually the only white boy in the neighborhood. And as I kind of often say, there was two ways you could go with me. I was an only child, and you either kind of became a wimp or you became super tough. And when I was a kid, I became a wimp. And so I stayed out of trouble, and we were in a lot of areas where there was a lot of gangs and stuff and just bullies, and I just stayed by myself. And that's how I kind of coped when I was a kid. And it was, I had a real rough childhood, very isolated, a lot of poverty. And my mom was a heroin addict, but she went on methadone after she got picked up for scoring heroin with me in the car.
Oh.
And so we ended up moving to Riverside to be very close to the methadone clinic, which was closer to Casablanca, which is an area where she used to score heroin. So, like most heroin addicts, I believe, I'm not sure, I was only 8 years old, but I think she kind of battled with methadone and heroin back and forth. But eventually she got off. And actually some of my finest memories are going to the methadone clinic with my mom when I was a kid, it was kind of fun. It was a little adventure, And I remember they would give me the Tang, and they would give her the pills or whatever. The meth. I don't even know what methadone is. I think it's just a pill form. And then
it's a pill.
Yeah, and then they would give her that in a Dixie cup, and they would give me Tang, and I liked it because my mom was awake when she was there, and she was just gone and asleep all the time.
Right.
But then eventually she just became a shut-in depressive, and really things got really rough, and she was just asleep all the time. Basically, she didn't work, and that was when things got really rough. But I kind of carried on. I did have some examples. I think we're really lucky in life, even if we have rough circumstances, to have someone in our life, whether it's an uncle or an aunt or whatever, who's an example of what can happen in life. It's kind of like I always say, like like when Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. Everybody broke it after that,
Right.
And it's kind of like that. It's like nobody thought you could do it until then. Once he did it, everybody did it. Now you go to the Olympics and people are running 3:30s, And it's kind of like that. Like once you see something. So I had an aunt and uncle, a couple aunts and uncles who would pick me up every once in a while and take me away for the weekend. And I kind of saw their lives, and I saw that, wow, that's what a normal life looks like. Like they're not constantly in fear and of lack of money, and the education helps. So I always had this idea that education was a thing. So anyways, to fast forward, I did really well in school and in high school, and I got into Cal State, and I did really well in Cal State. And I was an athlete. I was straight edge in high school and worked a job and at a sporting goods store. And I didn't toy with addiction. Probably the first addictive experience I ever had, as I had a 976 habit that got cut off real quick. I used to call the 976 surf line, and one time I decided to call one of the non-surf lines, and I called it, and it was like some sex worker type of thing, and you call it, and they tell you that, and it was an instant thing. Like I hung up, I was like, oh my god, that's going to show up on the phone bill. I'll lie about it. I'll tell her that it was just a misdial, and then 5 minutes later I did it again and again and again and again, and eventually I had like an $800 phone bill. And I had to pretend that I was calling as my dad and using a deep voice and telling them that his son had did this and that they needed to cut it down, and they put a block on it. So that was like my first addictive experience, and it was like a little encapsulated like week period of this thing I did that caused an immense bit of pleasure that I knew I shouldn't do, that was going to cause an amazing amount of wreckage and cost, and yet I could not stop doing it over and over and over. I totally remember bringing like the old style phone into my room, like with the cord and everything. Like, just absolute insanity. But I put the block on the phone as my fake dad, So, and then
when I'm trying to picture, wait.
Go ahead.
I'm getting a picture of this shit because I was terrified of that. I when I was a kid, I'd seen those 800 numbers, and I'm like, who would call that? And then you're holding the phone. Like, how do you hold the phone and have phone sex at the same time?
You have hands.
Yeah, well, I hear you, man. You got to be tactical. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, man. And just like, yeah.
And here's another thing, too, because here's the beauty of it, right? In your mind, the only thing you're thinking about is, how do I get away with this shit? Or how can I make this continue? But I've got this bill. There's no way for me to get away with it. Now, what if there was no phone bill? Imagine, who knows what story you'd be telling today and how old were you when you discovered that?
I was a junior in high school, so 16, 17, I think.
Exactly.
So that would put that it's a very kind of societal thing you just said, or real comment on society right now, because that's exactly what kids right now of 17 years old are doing. Because not only do they have unlimited access to that stuff, they have it on video.
Yes.
That's the internet, I mean, I just saw recently on Time Magazine did a big piece on that. It was like really harmful to society having that kind of access for teenagers to pornography. But anyways, that goes into a whole nother side note. Sorry about that. So that was my first run into addiction. That was always in my head, and that was way before I picked up alcohol or before I smoked. I got engaged when I was 18. I was in college. I did well in high school, and my mom was in an abusive relationship, and a bunch of my buddies from high school basically showed up at my mom's apartment at 6 a.m. and gathered her and grabbed all her stuff and moved her out from the guy that she was being abused by that we lived with. And so my fiance's family took me in at that point because I didn't know where to go. I just started college and I was still living at home.
Wow. And
my mom just kind of started a new life. So I'm there living, and my fiance was a daughter. She's a cheerleader, daughter of a Baptist preacher. Great guy, wonderful guy, and totally took me in. And I started doing addictive sexual things there. I started going to prostitutes. I started going to massage parlors, and I also started doing video porn. This was before the internet porn. And I do the whole go to the video store in this sketchy little closet area, and wait till everybody's out of the store. And you talk about embarrassing, and just like, oh God. I mean, I don't even like buying a pack of cigarettes. It makes me feel like a shithead. Going and buying porn with these embarrassing names and stuff, and then it was terrible. And I would go in, watch it on video, and then when no one's home, and then maybe someone shows up and you're scattered, putting away everything and hiding the video. And I went through that, and I also had the ultimate kind of rush of all this. The sex addiction for me was the actual picking up prostitutes. When I was a kid and we lived in these really bad areas, you would see these prostitutes on University Avenue and Riverside and Baseline and San Bernardino. And even when I was a kid, I remember in the back of my head kind of getting a little rush from seeing them, knowing I didn't even know exactly what it was, but I knew something was going on. So that became a thing. I did that for a while, but I was smart enough to know like that was going to go south quick. And what was really a breaking point for that was that I had read in the newspaper that a city council guy from Lake Elsinore had actually been busted picking up prostitutes in the exact same spot that I was in.
Ooh.
So when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay. So that's when I started going to massage parlors. And that was kind of my drug of choice with regards to the sex addiction, because it was a rush. It was very kept in tight. They run those places like a friggin' franchise, very tightly run and expensive, but just something I did, and I did more and more. And the more money I made, the more I did them. And that was something that I did for, from age of 18 to the age of 33. Long time, a lot of money.
Yeah. You're almost like a 15-year run right there. Pretty close, yeah.
That's a lot of money at $100 a pop.
Yep.
Yeah, damn, I never thought about it like that. I could have had a cocaine addiction or something.
Dude, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And that little rumbling in your stomach, you know what I mean? It's just like when you're calling the dope guy.
Yeah.
People
would describe the heroin, the how you get heroin, the wait for it, to get it, the whole thing. It was very similar to that. You go and it's very sketchy, and you park in the back, and you go to the front, and they let you into this room, and it was very, it had that anticipation rush for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was that was just much of it as the sex itself. And then, so anyway, I did that. And then the first time I drank, alcoholically and started smoking was when I went to New York. When I was in college, I was on the Model United Nations team. This is kind of the dichotomy that I was living. I was, on appearances was that I was kind of living the American dream. I was this really poor kid with a mom who was a heroin addict, and I was on, I had straight A's. I was Model United Nations. I was an amateur kickboxer. I had a beautiful fiance, cheerleader. Things were looking good, and yet I had this addiction that was like could have just blown up everything. I was risking everything for this crazy addiction. But then I discovered alcohol. And like I said, that was like, I suddenly realized that, oh man, that's like the new best thing. So then it was like, you got cigarettes, they're kind of like a maintenance thing. Then you got the sex stuff, which is just like the shot of heroin. And then you have the alcohol, which is kind of like the constant. It's better than cigarettes, not quite as good as the sex, but good. Especially that first 3 or 4 drinks, you get that warm feeling, and you feel like you're the most popular guy in the room, and you just discovered it, that you're you look like Tom Cruise,
Yeah.
and everyone else thinks it too. And, I graduated from college. I broke up with my fiance, and went to Pepperdine, got into Pepperdine Law School.
Hey, real quick, before you move on from there, was there anything significant in the breakup? Did any part of your addiction have to do with the breakup, or was just something that you guys just grew apart?
No, it definitely was part of the addiction. I mean, I just had such, I thought of it at the time as depression, but I realized now it was just this constant horrible guilt. Because I was doing other things besides for just the massage parlors. I was cheating. I worked at a gym, and like I would pick up girls from the gym and stuff, and she was an aerobics instructor there, so she would know these girls. And at one point they started calling the house, or one of them started calling the house, and you just have this guilt of just like, you're just like, how I'm doing this, it's just horrible. And then you think maybe it's her, like, it's her fault. She's not doing what she needs to be doing. Like, I wouldn't be having sex with prostitutes and one night stands and massage parlors if she was, doing something different. So you kind of had an excuse of like, it's just not working out. And I found another girlfriend and moved on from there and started over at Pepperdine Law.
Got it. Okay.
And at Pepperdine, it was just this horrible thing at Pepperdine because I loved law. I loved it. It was what I wanted to be for a long time. I wanted to be a lawyer. I had been my mentor was a very successful trial lawyer that I was really lucky to be involved with. And yet I couldn't get together for more than a few days at a time. Like I couldn't just be consistent. And when you're in law school or medical school or, it's really competitive environments, it's not good enough to be good for 3 days out of a week. You got to be good 6 or 7 days out of a week to kick ass. And I was in the middle of the class and I would get so depressed. It would be 3 days of good studying where I'd be like, okay, I'm going to work out. I'm going to eat right. I'm not going to drink or not have sex with one of the other students I shouldn't be having sex with and watching porn and all that stuff. And I do really well. And then I didn't know it was a relapse, but it was basically like a relapse. And I would go back into this depression of drinking all the time and not showing up to class. And I literally did that for 3 years of just like, I got suicidal towards the end. I remember I took the bar, passed it, and then I was just like suicidal. I just feel like there's nothing. I hope that people that are listening to this can relate because no matter what their addiction is, there is just nothing worse in my mind than having principles that you believe in yourself vehemently and not meeting those principles.
Yeah.
So basically lying to yourself over and over and over and again to the point where you say it to yourself and you laugh at yourself, And that's what I was. I was just like, yeah, you're not going to do this. Ha, ha, ha. And then if you can't meet your promises, then what's the point? Like, it was terrible.
Oh, man.
And I lived this lifestyle of, because of my upbringing of like, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Yeah. And that works great in finances. That works great in professions. That works great in sports. But it doesn't work with a damn in recovery or in addiction. It just puts you deeper and deeper into the grave, and that's what I was experiencing. Anyway, so I passed the bar and I got a job as a lawyer and, it was the same thing. I would kick ass for a little while and then I would go on benders and not show up to work. And then I would do well and I'd go back and forth, and I was good enough that I could keep the job and then I would mess up and then, and I was still doing everything that I was doing before. I was still doing the prostitutes. I was cheating on my girlfriends. I was smoking cigarettes like a crazy. I was drinking all the time. And I got into the habit of having bartender clients. I realized that people who own bars were not only good because they could get me free drinks and I could party with them, but also they were good clients because they always had legal issues. At one time in Oceanside, I lived in Oceanside, California after I moved from Pepperdine.
Right.
Malibu. I had the 3 biggest bars in town. I represented all of them. So at one point there was a lawsuit between 2 of them and I had to conflict out of it because I couldn't represent both of them obviously. So I kept on failing up. I would be at a law firm and it would get to the point where I wasn't going to be able to hang on any longer because I was screwing up too much, drinking and carousing. And then I would quit and go get a better job and a better job.
Oh, so, nice. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So when I was in Riverside, I joined this firm, Thompson and Colgate, which is really prestigious old firm that I worked there, and I kicked ass for the first month. I remember I billed like a crazy number of hours, and everything was great, happy I was going to change. And of course, you know, I moved with me from Oceanside. I brought myself with me, unfortunately. Didn't leave myself in Oceanside like I should have. I was sleeping with different secretaries at the firm. I was going to court hearings and then stopping at massage parlors on the way back. I was going to prostitutes. I was drinking a lot, binge drinking 3 or 4 nights a week, and I was smoking cigarettes, and it was just getting worse and worse. And so one night I got this DUI, and I didn't do anything halfway. I was driving my car at 80 miles per hour with a person in the passenger seat. We rolled off the side of the freeway on the 60 freeway, listening to rock and roll or Social Distortion at the time, you know, blared up.
Yeah.
My mind, and I rolled the car over the freeway, and you know, luckily the guy that I was with wasn't hurt too bad. He had a couple broken collarbone or broken toe, but that was it. I mean, not that that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But I blew a .29.
Oh, get out.
Yeah, I was extremely drunk. You know, the thing was talking about principles is I don't drink and drive. That's not something I do.
Right.
And yet I did it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was so drunk that I didn't make the decision. I never drank and drive in my life. You know, you're not going to catch me drinking and driving on a .07 because I would never make the decision to do that.
Right.
But when you're a .29, you don't make decisions. Your addiction is in control.
Absolutely.
Your sanity is in control.
Yeah.
So I had to quit. At the time, I was doing really good at that law firm. I was on the Ecological Protection Committee for Moreno Valley. My career was all moving up, but that was so humiliating that I had to get out of there. So I once again failed up, and I went and got a job at an even better firm in Santa Monica, Van Ant and Suzumoto, which is a firm. It's no longer there, but it was a big firm out in the Water Garden out there, and making more money and living in a nicer place. And, you know, it was just like, and again, I'm like, oh, this is going to be perfect because I solved my problem. I knew what my problem was. My problem was that I was driving when I was drunk. So I needed to move to a place where you could walk. So I moved to Pico and 34th. And there was bars all over the place. There was massage parlors within walking distance, you know, on Pico and 34th in Santa Monica.
Dude, it sounds like a dream come true for an addict.
Yeah, it was. It was awesome. I loved to smoke on balconies too. I would go home. I never smoked in front of anybody. I was a closet smoker. So I would come home after a day of work and I'd just be like jonesing for a cigarette. So I'd smoke a pack of cigarettes and drink, you know, and then it was just debauchery. My whole life was just trying to keep it together at the law firm and absolute debauchery with the three-headed monster of cigarettes, alcohol, and sex addiction.
And all sneaky. Everything sneaky. All on the DL. All by yourself. Everything had to be on the sneak.
Everything in the drinking even. I didn't drink with friends. I didn't want to be around my real friends when I drank. I'd have a beer or two or something maybe, but when I wanted to go to a dark bar by myself, that's how I drank, you know.
Seedy.
Yeah, seedy. I love that word. Yeah. That's how I. Yep. That's my jam. Seedy. that should have been the name of my book.
Yep. That's the next one. Seedy.
So, yeah. So, I'll describe what happened the night that it all came undone. If you're ready.
Oh, dude, bring it, man.
So, July 26th, 2003. I had a meeting scheduled with a really big client that was Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up here. I had failed out of Van Ant and Suzumoto and I was about to get fired, so I left there and I started a firm with a buddy of mine, and we had an office in Pasadena and Century City. And my alcoholism and everything got even worse because I was making a lot more money and I was my own boss.
Yep.
So I had a lot more time. So we had this meeting with this guy who was flying in from Singapore, and we were going to meet at Brookside Golf Course in Pasadena at a 7 a.m. tea time or 6 a.m. or really early tea time. And I'm just got home from work and I'm smoking and drinking, and I'm saying to myself, okay, just go to bed. You got to get up for this meeting. Don't go drinking. Don't go drinking. And then I talk myself into it. Okay, I'll just have a couple drinks. So I go up to the Liquid Kitty, which is about 3 blocks up, dark, seedy bar, and I drank about, I think, 12 Jack and Cokes after having drank at home too, and had 2 packs of cigarettes, and I went into a blackout. I don't remember going into that blackout. I don't remember anything that happened. Most of this I can tell you because of the police report and because of witness accounts. But I walked to an ATM machine and got $100 out. I went to the front of a massage parlor that was on Pico Boulevard, very close to my condo. And I knocked on the door a bunch of times and woke a bunch of people up. Nobody answered, of course, because it was 3 a.m. and there's nobody at a massage parlor at 3 a.m. So I went around the back and I climbed in the window. But the window I climbed in was next to the window of the massage parlor. It was all one solid wall, so it all looked the same. And I climbed into some guy's bathroom, took all my clothes off, walked into this guy's friggin' hotel room / apartment, and attacked him. He says I attacked him. He says he woke up from the smell of cigarettes and alcohol to some naked psycho. Funny now, 13 years later. Not funny then.
Dude, I am fucking picturing this, and I know the listeners are.
And he goes crazy because there's a 6'4", 220-pound naked guy with a heart on in his apartment. And, in all seriousness, that guy had every right to kill me. I'm lucky. I'm very glad he didn't, and I'm very glad he didn't get hurt. But that's the first memory I have, is being in a dark room, spinning around, fighting with this guy. And I put him in a chokehold, apparently, and he got free of it. And I went out the window where I came, and he went out the front and chased me down to a yard across the street. They beat the hell out of me. I ran away, half naked, bleeding all over the place. They busted my head open, and the cops came. And the next thing I knew, I woke up in a hospital bed with a doctor stapling my head shut with a giant staple gun. I thought I was in jail, but I was in I thought I was in a hospital, but I was in the Santa Monica jail. They had a little hospital room for people like me. And they put me in jail, and I called my ex-girlfriend, who's a criminal defense attorney, and, said, hey, come bail me out. And she says, what are you being charged with? And I say, I'm not sure, but I think solicitation of prostitution or something. I'm not sure. I was really drunk. And then she shows up, and I say, what's going on? And why aren't you bailing me out? And she says, you're being charged with attempted murder.
Oh.
And so I didn't have a memory of it. At that time, I didn't have any memory of what had happened other than going to the bar, being drunk, and then being in a room, spinning around with some guy yelling. I remember after that going out the room and everything. So, at that point, they bailed me out, or I went to jail. I was suicidal. They put me in the 5150, the loony bin at Twin Towers jail in Los Angeles. And I was just done. I was like, you know what? I wasn't supposed to have as successful a life as I had already. I became a lawyer. I've traveled some great places. I've met some great people. I'm done. Ended up getting bailed out into Pasadena Recovery Center, which is a rehab in Pasadena. You're from Pasadena. You've probably heard of that, right? Mm. And I was in there for 6 months. And slowly but surely, while I was in there with at the time, this guy, Bob Forrest, who you're probably familiar with, was working there. He was a van driver. He was an atheist and a cool guy, and he had a real good spin on 12 steps. And Dr. Lee Bloom was there, and I kind of slowly but surely bought in. I was like, well, I'm going to kill myself once they sentence me to prison anyway. But meanwhile, I'm just going to eat macaroni and cheese and play ping pong and go to these meetings, And I was practicing law. They didn't disbar me because they don't disbar you until you're actually convicted.
Right.
So I was fighting the case for 2 years. So I was actually practicing law while in rehab. My partner would bring me cases in rehab and tell me okay, this is what's going on. What do we do here? What do we do here? And I would do some work there off my laptop.
Oh, nice.
So I always say I got to say I'm probably the only attorney in California who argued an appellate court case in the 2nd District one day, I think it was on a Tuesday, And on the Wednesday, I went to my own felony arraignment.
Oh, man.
So that was the last time, that night was the last time I ever drank. My sex addiction lingered on a little bit after that, but that stopped. And the cigarettes took me 5 more years after that. Anyway, I ended up getting disbarred. I ended up getting charged with a bunch of sex crimes. And the reason they charged me with sex crimes was because the theory of the DA was that I had entered into the room with the intent to commit a rape. Obviously, I had got $100 out, which was I was going to use for the massage parlor, and I thought I was out of my mind. And I thought I could fight the case, but the bottom line was I was looking at 20 years if I got convicted on everything.
Ooh.
So I ended up taking a deal. And the deal sent me to Chino prison for what's called a 90-day evaluation. And the deal was I go to Chino for 90 days, they evaluate me, and then they get out, and the judge decides whether I go back to prison or whether I get out. I did my 90 days in Chino, and I won't go into that whole thing, but it was gnarly as you see in the movies.
Dude, Chino, I've never seen a movie or a series where somebody's talking about being in Chino, and it's just like murders and gangbangers, and it's like horrific.
Yeah, Chino's gnarly. Before I went in, I actually, unfortunately, did a little research on it and found out it's at the time, at least, it was the most dangerous prison in the United States. And the reason is because it's a structurally failing prison because it's so old. And secondly, because it's where they transfer everybody. So anybody in Southern California that's going to go to prison goes there first. So you get a lot of people who don't care because that's not where they're going to be.
Oh, right.
So it was very dangerous, and I made it out. I didn't get, I got attacked a few times, but I was fine. And the program saved my life in there. I went in there with my big book and my 12 and 12, and I read the big book every day, and I prayed and meditated, and I was in. At that point I was like 12 steps of saving my life.
Yep.
I've got a chance at a life. Maybe, we'll see how it goes. And it was kind of like this thing where when you're in there and you're not playing games and people see that you're for real about this recovery, because there's a lot of people incarcerated who are addicts. I would say the vast majority of them are addicts. Smart criminals generally don't get caught. It's the drunk ones.
Right.
And I'm not saying everybody. There's some quote unquote bad people in there, but a lot of them were addicts. And when they see that you're serious about your sobriety and you're reading that book and you're not engaging in BS and playing games, you tend to get a bit of a ticket. You get a bit of a pass. And,
right.
And it really saved my ass while I was in there.
I really think that, I'm a firm believer because I've seen it happen a bunch of times, and they say, expect a miracle. I've seen people beat cancer, and I've seen people, go through some severe situations in their lives once they grab hold of recovery. And for me, there's no question about it. God was looking out for you in there. Yeah,
no doubt. I mean, it was amazing. It was even, if people were interested, I go into great detail in my book about the time I was incarcerated. And there's no question that, the HP was in effect in there.
So how long were you in Chino again?
I was in Chino for 111 days.
Okay.
And the way it works is you have to go from LA, from Twin Towers, then to Chino, then back to Twin Towers. So all in all, I was incarcerated for about 120 days. Okay. And then when I got out, I went to the courtroom, and I had been that was 2 years from the time of the incident until I went to Chino. Actually, 1 year and 9 months from the date of the incident to the day that I was incarcerated. It was like 1 year and 9 months from the time I went in, and then 2 years from almost to the date from the date of the incident until I got out. But during that time, I went to meetings every single day. In fact, the judge sentenced me to 5 meetings a week for 5 years. So I was actually on a court card for 8 years.
Wow, dude, that's amazing.
So we went to the court hearing, which this was really the amazing thing, and I hate to give away everything that's in the book, but that's all right, is that the judge was an alcoholic and said in my sentencing hearing that he was an alcoholic. And the other thing that was so amazing about this was that the entire courtroom was packed with people from 12-step programs that were there to support me. So it was a packed room only, and the judge was like, we've never had this many people in the courtroom, and we've never had this many letters of support.
Wow.
And of course, with that, and I had no relapse, and they were testing me, and I was sincerely in the program. This wasn't some BS where I was like playing the game that a lot of people play. I was in, because last house on the block.
Yep.
It doesn't get any more last house on the block when you're a disbarred lawyer, 2-strike felon, registered sex offender.
Ugh.
I mean, that's as bad as it gets. So I was like, this is it. I got nothing else. This is it. So I'm in. And they showed up for me. The judge let me go that day. I've got this wreckage, horrible wreckage, or at least on paper it looks awfully horrible. But the amazing thing is that my life has been just amazing since then. And it's just, the thing about it's just such a miracle. You're so lucky to have 12, to be in the program. People are I don't mean you, I mean one is so lucky. I am so lucky to be in the program, because it's like a way of living that works in rough going, as they say. It's like I got no way to live, and then you hand me this new system, and I'm like, oh, here it is.
Yes.
This is it. Open up the book, and you know what to do. Pray in the morning, pray at night, pray in the morning, and do the in between. Go to meetings, help people, be of service, and everything will work out. And it does. Everything works out. And it's been a beautiful thing. I've been sober for 13 years. Been out I got out 2 years afterwards, and my life is just. My life's amazing. I've had amazing jobs. I've written this book that's done really, really well. It's Amazon top 100 on the memoirs list, which is amazing. And
how long's the book been out?
Since July, right? No, August. I think since August
Of last year?
August. Yeah.
That's wild.
When I first pitched the book, it was the worst possible time in the world to come out with a book. It was right after the recession hit, or it was 2 years after. But we hadn't recovered yet, and Million Little Pieces, that whole scandal had come out, and so a lot of publishers were like kind of walking away from those type of stories. And even though I had this kind of amazing story, most people walked away. I thought it wouldn't happen because I had a lot of connections, because I knew a lot of people in the program who written memoirs, and I had some Hollywood connections and stuff, but I was just getting the door shut on me over and over. So I started my own publishing company, published it under that, and I'm actually taking on some other authors now. And it was the best thing I could possibly have done, because, just financially, I make all the money off my book. And secondly, I control the book. I had complete control over it. I controlled the editing, the whole process, and I can set the price, so I don't have to sell it for such a high price that people don't buy it. And it's been wonderful. It's been absolutely wonderful. It's like one of those things where you think it's a bad thing, and it turned out to be like the best thing,
So now you have your own publishing company?
Yeah. It's a small press. It's just, my fiance and I, but we're in the process of putting out a book that's has nothing to do with recovery. It's just it's an art book. And then, we're looking at different authors and stuff. We want to find people that we think are good writers in the art world or in the 12-step recovery world that kind of fall in the cracks. They're not getting picked up by the really big publishers, because that market's really shrinking down. It's kind of like movies. They make less and less of the big ones.
Right. So now, because this is the most important part of your story right here, right now, because like you just said, I have so many people in the private accountability group, the Facebook private accountability group, and you hear them in there talking about that resistance to go to meetings, that resistance to connect with the 12-step fellowship. I don't know any other way to do this thing. If I hadn't found 12-step recovery, I would be dead. Okay, that's the amount of drugs that I was doing. I could not stop. There wasn't any on and off switch. It was every single day. And once I found the program, it's like you said, somebody handed me a guide, a manual for living, and I just had to apply this in my life. But it's that first step. It's that initial first step that you have to just be wrecked. And in your particular case, you're disbarred. You lose your license. You end up in jail. You've got a criminal record. And now you talk like your life is beyond your wildest dreams. So So for now, how is it that you are earning a living, and what is your life like today financially after losing your license?
Well, it was rough going at first, and but it was like you said, you just do one step at a time. And I worked for a client at once. I went into the entertainment business for a while and started as a PA, and then kind of worked my way up to some production design stuff. And then eventually an unbelievable thing happened is I got hired as a contract manager for one of the largest steel companies in the world, a commercial metals company. And it was insane. My friend worked there, and she told me about the job. She said, "You'd be perfect." I'd be perfect. I used to be a lawyer. I could be a contract manager, but I'm a 2-strike felon. I'm a disbarred lawyer. Are you freaking crazy? Like, why are you bothering me with this crap? So I went in there. I interviewed. They loved me. For the people out there, if you're a hardcore 12-stepper, it's hard not to love you as an employer, right? Because you're going to show up every day and work your butt off. You're honest. You're not going to steal from them. I mean, we're good employees, right? And so I showed up, and they loved me, and they did a criminal background. They were going to do a criminal background check. So I told them, I was straight up with them. I said, I was convicted of a violent felony assault that occurred during a blackout. I have a DUI. But I've been sober for, at the time, I think it was 5 years or 6 years. And, here's letters of recommendation. Here's exactly what happened, blah, blah, blah. So I said, here's the other thing. Here's the catch. I said, I need a letter from you guys giving me this offer because I have a bunch of entertainment jobs lined up, and if I have to turn those down. So they gave me the letter. Then they got the criminal background check, and they really dove in and saw the details of what happened. And they were like, oh, crap. But here's the thing. This was right before the collapse, right? So you're familiar with this because you're in the mortgage business.
Oh, yeah.
This is right before the collapse, okay? So this company was a small company that had been bought by a giant company. But they were making so much money that the big company let them do whatever the hell they wanted. Because they just, as long as you keep sending us tons of money. So it's Fontana Steel, the guys that did most of the Staples Center and all the big steel projects downtown. So they let them hire whoever they wanted. And so when they got the criminal background check, they were like, oh my God, we can't not hire you because we already have this letter of intent, but we can't send this criminal background check to corporate. They'll cut our heads off. So, so they had to hire me. Now, the joke is on, it was a good thing. I was a great employee. I worked my butt off for them. I was super grateful. And it was the best thing that could happen because I made a lot of money and I worked there. But after about 3 years, the construction industry got worse and worse and worse and worse. Eventually, I got laid off, and I got a compensation plan because I was a regional contract manager, which is not super high in the company, but pretty high. And I lived off that, and I wrote my book, and I did a little investing, and now I have a couple businesses that involve credit, kind of boring stuff, but just like credit stuff. And those are kind of like the pay the bills, and the book pays some bills, and I do legal research for various attorneys and stuff. So it's kind of weird. I used to be so scared, like it would be like one job. I'm so used to having a job that just every week you get this check, but kind of the East Side Los Angeles way of living of not having a regular day job, I kind of love it. So I just get work here and there, and it just pays the bills, and it's awesome. Like it's funny. I remember this guy telling me when I went to a party. He was telling me he goes, "You know how many books you're going to sell when you self-publish?" He goes, "How many friends do you have? Divide that by 2." And now I sell that many books in one day. So
that's wild.
So that's awesome because and it was I had a lot of help with the book, and a lot of people pitched in, and I followed it. I did what they tell you in AA, right? You follow the advice that they tell you. Listen.
Yes.
So people told me, get a professional editor, get a professional story editor, get a professional book cover designer. Don't chintz. So I did it all right, and it ended up turning out the way it turned out. So that answers your question.
That's beautiful, man. And that's exactly the answer I wanted. I want the listeners to hear this. That resistance to change. I mean, seriously, there is a magic that happens. It's just a magic because there's no way to explain it. You do the deal, you work the steps, you go to meetings. More importantly, you give back and you do service. And all of a sudden, things just present themselves. You know, you just walk into things effortlessly. All right. And so when people, when newcomers come in and they'll say things to me like, oh man, okay, yeah, no, I can't make 90 meetings in 90 days because now that I'm sober, I got to get my job back and I got to spend more time with my wife and, you know, I got to drop my kids off at school and I got all this stuff and I got to get this back. And I go, okay, man, well, let me know how it works out for you.
Call me when you're ready.
Yeah, because
right.
The reality is you know, they're still running the show and they don't have any idea that there is a power greater than themselves that's physically at work. It is at work. I believe it. I'm listening to your story. There's no question about it. You know, you're probably happier now than you've ever been in your entire life.
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. Because it's just like I do what I always had great principles. I could show you a list of my principles that I had when I was doing the worst shit you could imagine. Those are the same principles. I did not want to breach those, but I did. The difference between me then and now is only one thing, and that is I no longer breach those principles. I live by those. If I say I'm going to show up somewhere, I show up. If I need to do something, I do it. I'm of service. You know, somebody asks me to speak, I speak. You know, it's not like you're saying or anything, but you have these principles, and you just follow them. You know, you go to the meetings. I'm grateful. I don't know how else I could have lived. I'm sure I would have died eventually on this program. I was pretty close to it that night, and I was pretty close to it the night that I had my DUI. You know, I rolled a car over at 80 miles per hour. But now it's like, and the great thing about sobriety, maybe this will help some of the others, is like you age backwards for a while. Yeah. You know, I mean, I'm smoking, drinking, eating like crap. I kind of did the Jerry Stahl, you know, Permanent Midnight, like he would be on heroin, but also run and juice. But, you know, I kind of did that a little bit too, you know. But so because I was an athlete and I was a vegetarian and stuff, but, you know, I also had a kind of a fast food thing I did. But now, like, you know, I'm pescatarian, somewhere between pescatarian and vegan. You know, I don't smoke anymore. I exercise consistently, you know, and it's like I feel so good. I mean, I've never felt this. I feel younger now. I'm 45. I'm in better shape now, and I feel younger now than I did when I was 21.
Oh, I get it, dude. Awesome. I get it, man. And the reality is that you have a purpose. You always had a purpose. God had a vision for you that you had no idea, and it took you going through what you went through to get to this point right here where you could carry your message, just like me, and just like so many. You know, don't wait till it's jails, institutions, and death. Right, Joseph? Yeah.
It takes what it takes. But, you know, but all that they say it takes what it takes, but they also said your bottom is when you stop digging. And I had a friggin' backhoe. I had a backhoe when I was digging my bottom. So,
dude, I love.
There's a lot of people. I always say, you know, I'll say to like sponsees, I'll be like, you know, you feel sorry for me because I had this bottom. There's a guy who drank one time and is dead. And then there's another guy who's keeps on, you know, getting away with it. You know, there's guys that drink once and go to AA and they're cool, and there's guys that drink once and die. So, you know, it's God works in mysterious ways. I don't know how it works, but I know I hit my bottom, and I hope that people are listening to this, if they're like weighing their options, and try it out. Oof. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. What'd you do? You missed a few nights of drinking, right?
We will gladly refund your misery.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Joseph, let's start closing up, buddy, because, oh, my God, we could talk for hours. I love this. I'm loving this interview.
Oh, thanks.
Let's see here. I normally ask a few questions here. I'm not going to ask you the first one. The first one is, what was keeping you from getting clean or staying clean when you first got introduced to recovery? Because it was nothing, you know. You went in 100%. Here's the question I want to know. When did it hit you? When did you have that aha moment, you know, when you first got into recovery, when you accepted you were powerless over drugs and alcohol and sex addiction, but for the first time you had developed the hope that you could recover?
Well, one was when I was so stressed out, you know, going through all that stuff, and I was in rehab, and then I got out of rehab and I was sober living, and I had to go to quartered therapy. And I was so stressed out that one time I went to a massage parlor after the incident, And I was talking to the therapist, and I just blurted it out and told the therapist I did it. And she just lost, she was like, what, are you effing out of your mind? Like, she was this really mild-mannered person, and she was like, are you effing out of your mind? Are you stupid? And I was just like, whoa, you know? And I was like, yeah, I'm doing, like, that's craziness. So that's one. And then with the cigarettes, I always tell people, like, the alcohol, I didn't experience the powerless maybe in some way that other people did, because I had to quit, because I had, like I said, I had a gun to my head.
Yeah.
So I never really got to that point where I really wanted to stop drinking. I love blacking out and everything. I knew, you know, despite the negative consequences, I never got to the point where I was trying to stop. I was trying to control it a bit, but I never tried to stop. But with cigarettes, you know, you're 5 years into your 12-step meetings, and you're going outside killing yourself. It's hard not to go, wait a second, this is a substance that's killing me that I can't stop. What the hell? So that was a powerless moment too, and I had to go to another program for that. And so those two incidents probably are what led me to really believe I was powerless. And then, you know, like that moment where you're just like, God, I can't do this on my own. I don't know how quitting is going to help me stop, but I give up. It's in your hands. I'm done fighting, because I can't beat this gorilla up in this ring, you know. It's like when you're in a boxing, you know, you get out of the friggin' ring, you're not going to win, you know. And it happened, and it's some kind of weird magic that you can't really put words on, but it exists, because I've seen it. I've seen it myself, and I've seen it in sponsees and people in the rooms where they just, one day they have this powerless where they just give up. They just give up, and in that giving up, they gain this power.
It is amazing. And it's beautiful to watch, you know, when somebody gets it and they're like, and all they say is like, I get it, man. Like, I am so done with this shit. I'm like, I'm never going to do this again. And it's that realization that as long as they feel as though they've got one more, like they can control it, like they've got everything under control, even just one aspect of it, they know they're going to go back out. They have to just be like, I remember it. I went to my sponsor and I just said, I will do whatever it is you tell me to do.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
I'm done. I'm so done, right? And I just remember feeling so desperate. It's so much pain, right? So, man, yeah, that's that spiritual awakening that so many of us have. That you're just like, I'm done. Well, I mean, obviously, there's your book. Are there any other books you could recommend to our newcomers? But well, actually, first, tell us a little bit more about the book, because I don't know if we covered it too much.
Well, straight pepper diet. Our people with time will know what that means, and those who don't, read the flap. You know, it's a good read. I was able to price it so low that you can't not read it. I wrote it with the intention, because I know the type of books I like are books that are page turners.
Yes.
So if you've ever read like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, or even like some John Grisham stuff, even though it's not like quote unquote literature, that's kind of the style I wrote it in. It's kind of like hard boiled, very quick moving. So a lot of people say it's 400 pages. And a lot of people say they've read it in 1 or 2 nights. It's entertaining. You know, it's an AA story, really, right? It's the back of the book, but it's just a little longer and a little bit more dramatic. So, and you know, I hope it helps some people. People have said it's helped them. I hope it helps them, and not just as a showing what can happen and the recovery that follows. And then the book that really changed me. I know that maybe some of your listeners, you know, you always hear this thing about I have a problem with the God thing, you know. And I never really had a problem with the God thing, but I go to Agape, and I'm a Science of Mind guy, and a friend of mine gave me This Thing Called You by Ernest Holmes. This Thing Called You by Ernest Holmes. And that's one of those books where you can just turn it to any page and just read some truth, you know, kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous textbook, where you can just turn to any page and you're like, oh, that's true. And there's nothing better than truth, you know, like when you hear the truth, you're just like, it's kind of like Power Now. When I was driving out to my mom's, I heard that I was listening to the CD of Power Now. And that guy basically took one day at a time and turned it into an empire, right? but is there anything truer or more powerful than you only have power over right here, right now. So thinking about the past and thinking about the future ain't doing you no good. All it's doing is blowing right now, So that's kind of the way that book, this thing called You, it's by Ernest Holmes, who founded Science of Mind and who has a whole bunch of books. But that's the book that I think is most accessible that he wrote.
Beautiful.
And, Dr. Michael Beckwith, Spiritual Liberation is another good book. And Chuck C's
New Pair of Glasses.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Do you have your book in Audible yet? Or Audible?
Yeah. I did the recording on it. It's in my voice, but I put a nose strip on, so it's not as nasally as this. I got that SoCal drawl, that nasal SoCal drawl, but in the book it's a little bit better. And I put the nasal strip on. The engineer insisted.
Good. All right. Well, I'm going to get that for sure, because that's how I like to read my books. I like to listen to them. For sure.
Cool.
For sure. So what is the best suggestion you have ever received?
1 X at a time. 1 X at a time. We hear, whether you call it the power of now, whether you call it 1 day at a time, whether you call it, take it easy, it really comes down to like, you can handle this thing that's right in front of you. Just break it up and do whatever piece you need to break it up to do. And when you first get sober and you're just overwhelmed by the amount of wreckage you have, imagine the wreckage I had, and just overwhelming. And when they told me that in rehab, I was like, okay, that is a beautiful mind trick. I'm going to be like, get up, put your shoes on. Okay, I'm done with that. Go eat breakfast. If you need to break it up with that, you'd be like, pour the orange juice, do this. And then when it gets to the harder stuff, you might need to break it down a little bit more. Like, okay, don't call the client, dial the number, whatever it takes. But you can do one thing at a time. I don't even like 1 day at a time. That's too much. One thing at a time, whatever it is, just break it down. It's in all different things. In golf, the best psychologist in golf, Bob Rotella, he says the exact same thing. It's just 1 day at a time, one shot at a time. He says that to the best players on the PGA Tour, one shot at a time. If you're thinking about the shot you just blew or the difficult shot coming up, you're going to blow this shot. So one shot at a time, and he sends them a bill for $1,000 an hour. So. 1 X at a time.
1 X at a time. Well, my last question is, if you could give our newcomers only one suggestion, what would it be?
Lean in. Just give them another one. Lean in. Like, just lean into this. Whatever it is. If it's these problems that you think you have, lean into them. The program's there for you. There are people that are amazing in this program, like you, there's rooms full of them, and they're just amazing. And if you ask for help, they will help you. And if they don't, they'll send you to someone who can. And if you just put the effort in and lean into it, whatever it is, you'll get the solution in the rooms. So I just say, lean into it.
Damn, this is great stuff, Joseph. Dude, gold, listeners. I hope you're gonna have to listen to this one twice. Seriously, value bombs. The cool thing was I was so excited about this interview. I told a few of my friends that I was going to be interviewing you, right? And they're like, I'm not sure I know who Joseph Naus is, right? But I'd say straight pepper diet, and they go, oh, out of the big book? Oh. They got that one quick.
Oh, nice. Page 69, wink, wink.
Guys, straight pepper diet. Get it. Read it, buy it, or listen to it. Joseph, what's the best way that our listeners can get a hold of you?
My website for the book is straightpepperdietmemoir.com, or I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and Twitter is Joseph W. Naus, Naus.
I'm going to have all that on the show notes, guys. Just go to the show notes, click on it. You'll find them there and the book. Wow, what an adventure. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thanks for all the service you are to all your listeners. Service you're doing to all your listeners.
Man, it's just, I always say the same thing. HP, baby. He gave me a gift, and I am not the well, but I certainly do enjoy being the pipe every once in a while. Folks, we've now reached the end of our show. Thanks for joining us, and as we say here in Costa Rica, pura vida.
Pura vida.
Thank you for joining us on the Share Recovery Podcast. To check out the show notes page on this interview or to thank our guests for sharing their story, go to www.thesharepodcast.com. While you're on the website, don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter to stay up to date on the latest news, podcasts, and interviews. Want to be one of our guests and share your story? Then go to our website and click on the Share Your Story button. We share our inspiring recovery stories every Tuesday, so subscribe to our show on iTunes or Stitcher Radio to get your free weekly download. We'll see you then. The opinions shared on this show reflect those of the individual speaker and not of any 12-Step Fellowship as a whole. And though we discuss 12-Step recovery and the impact it had in our lives, we do not promote or endorse any 12-Step Anonymous program.